Now that the clamps are off of here, I can level this little center strip down to the actual height of the neck so that we can put the fingerboard on. I should have used just plain maple so it'd be easier to carve. This curly maple is much harder to carve, but I just had this strip laying around that wasn't doing anything, so I used it. It's pretty smooth now. I'll probably just take a scraper or something and make sure, but I think it's pretty flat. I think it's good. I thought I'd start off with what they refer to as light brown on the Fiebing's leather die. Honestly, I don't think of this as being really light brown. Most everyone says that it's got more red in it, but that's okay. We're just gonna start here and go with that. You can see there what that looks like. You know, it's not gonna match. I knew that when I put it on there. That's okay. I was going for strength. I wanted maple because I know maple is way stronger than mahogany. And since I had it in the right size, I used the curly maple. Plain maple would have matched it better, to be perfectly honest with you, but I didn't have a piece of plain maple in the size that I needed to fit this area. So we went with curly maple. And quite honestly, I think that looks pretty cool. I don't see a real problem with that. But that's just me. Maybe my taste is different than your taste. Maybe you'd have a fit if this was your instrument. And I would say, well, then just take it to somebody else who's not colorblind, number one, and who you think would do a better job and make it last longer than I'm gonna make this last. I'm not so sure you'll have a lot of choices in that regard. I know there are lots of really good repairmen out there, but finding them is the hard thing. You know what? I think I'm just going to call that good enough, at least for now. That looks pretty good to me. I don't see a real problem with that. It doesn't match exactly, but you know what? I think sometimes when you call attention to something that don't match, it becomes more like a feature. And I don't really see a problem with that. Once we get some clear finish over that, I think it's going to look pretty good. I'll check with my wife just to make sure I'm not completely screwing up here, because I never know by color. The mandolin is shaping up and I'm ready to put the fretboard back on it, but I thought I ought to look at this and put a straight edge on here and see if I see any problem. And yeah, I actually do. There's an underbow in there already. There's already, 8 or 10 thousandths, maybe more underbow in this neck. That's not good when your goal is to have a flat neck and, because the strings are going to pull underbow into it. So, or a relief or whatever your fancy word is. The problem is you don't want to start off with that relief. You want to get rid of that and make it flat. So I'm going to try to get it as flat as possible. And now that I cleaned that off, I'm going to look at it again. Well, that's pretty flat now. I'll be honest, it's pretty close. It's almost passable. But I think I'm going to just give myself a little bit more insurance, put this 220 on here. and just very lightly hit it through here, bearing down on the ends. And I'm going to check it again. It's got to be pretty close to perfect now. I'm holding it up at a light. I know you can't see me doing that, but I'm holding it up and looking at the bottom of my straight edge on a light, a real bright light here, and I can barely see any light coming through there at all, but I do see a little bit, so might as well try to get a little bit more out of here if we can. This is the time to do it if you're going to do it. Oh man, that looks good now. I'm not kidding you, I don't see a bit of light coming through there. That's a good thing. You want to get it as flat as you can get it. There's no point in starting out with underbow. Now that I get it over on this side, I think I have underbow still. Yeah, on this side, I still have some issues. I was mainly focusing on the treble side. On the bass side here, we still got some issues. I'm putting more pressure on the bass side now, quite a bit more. It mostly seems to be coming from this extension to me. Wow, that looks a lot better. Honestly, I can see the tiniest amount of light coming through there on the bass side now. I'm going to make sure the treble side didn't change. Yeah, I don't see any light on the treble side at all. And I can see just a hint in this area right here on the trebles, on the bass side. When I say a hint, I mean like you can just barely make out that there's light shining under it. So it doesn't take much when you're that close. So I'm going to check it again. Well, honestly, I do see a little bit still. And it seems like a lot of it's coming from up here now. I think that's probably fine right there. We're pretty darn flat. I'm just going to check this. I know this, most of the time these fingerboards are not that flat because they got the frets in them and that causes them to distort, but I'm going to force it into it and see if I see light. I don't see any light anywhere, so I'd say the fretboard itself is fine. There's these little holes that were drilled in here for the pins. I'm just going to kind of clean them out a little bit. I think we can put the pins back in the same holes. And I think I put those little pins in here already, so hopefully I can reuse them. Just stick them back in there. Pretty positive I put them in here, but right at the moment I don't see them. Yeah, here they are. I'm going to drive them in a little deeper than they were in there before. And this one will probably have to be driven a little bit harder. Now hopefully those will still line up. They do. They line up perfectly. So that'll make my job a lot easier for lining this fingerboard back up. It feels really good, in fact. With that in mind, not much point in delaying it. We might as well get the glue on here and get her going. You've heard me say it a million times. You want to make sure you get a 100% coverage. Little air pockets, that's why you see me brushing it around in circles and things, is I want to get rid of the air pockets. You'd be surprised if you just stuck your wood on there and if you just put two pieces together with some glue on there, there will be air pockets everywhere. And that's where you lose your strength. You don't want air pockets. So it's way better to just take a brush, rub it around like this. Even when you could do it, I mean, a spreader is pretty good, but even a spreader can go over the top of an air pocket. So I like the brush because you brush it back and forth and you pretty much can tell, you can just tell by looking, you have no air pockets at all. And then it's a good idea, you know, to put it on both surfaces And I'm going to put it on both surfaces on this one. You know, ordinarily I don't, necessarily on a fretboard, I don't always do that because, you know, you don't necessarily need it on a fretboard on both surfaces. But because this has got a history of this neck breaking, and I know it's not going to break again, but because it's got that history, I want to make absolutely positively sure that every single area is completely stuck. You know, it's a strength thing. This will just add that much more strength, and it should not ever give him a problem again. Yeah, and again, the thin is better. You know, try to get a thin coat on, not a heavy, thick coat. So I'm actually going to wipe here, and if I, you know, got places where it's a little heavy, I'll just wipe it down. That's pretty good right there. I don't think we've got any issues. Now we'll line up our little holes, and they line right up perfectly. So that's easy. We are good to go. So I'll get the clamps and I'll show you what it looks like all clamped up. I think I'll show you just with 2 clamps how much glue is starting to pop out of there. And keep in mind, I didn't put a lot of glue on there. So it, you know, that gives you some idea you're making good contact when you get a good long stream, a steady stream of glue like this. I try to keep it cleaned up as much as I can. I'll show you some more here in just a minute. Well, there you go. It's all clamped up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clamps to hold that fingerboard on there. And some of you will instantly say that's more than you need. And the thing about what you're not understanding is that you need full pressure on this. And it, you know, in a way it would even be better if I had one long caul board to lay on top of this to keep it perfectly flat. In fact, that would have been a good idea on really all the fretboards I've ever glued on. Didn't think of it till just now, but you know, it would be good because you're, you know, these clamps, by putting this many clamps, you're ensuring flatness. You know, if you only put a couple of clamps on there, I guarantee you it's going to be wavy like this. So putting all these clamps on here assures good contact all the way up and down the neck. And like I said, really, a caul board on top to help ensure flatness would even be better, really. Kind of wish I would have done that. But I've done a million of them this way and I've been fine, but I think a caul board would actually be an improvement to this process. So maybe in the future that's what I'll do. This is really turning out nice. It's lined up perfectly because of those little nails that were there. It lined it up perfectly with the neck the way it came off before. I don't even think you're going to be able to tell the fretboard was off of this when you're done. Look at it really close. It's really fine. It's perfect. Same way on this side. So I don't even think you're going to be able to tell it was off. Obviously you'll be able to tell when you look at the other side and see the scarf joint. But who knows, that could have been done from the builder at the beginning. You just, you know, the way it looks. We're going to have to let that set overnight and then we'll move on. Quite honestly, I've done quite a bit of work on this mandolin off camera. I can't remember the last thing I filmed, but as you can see, I've got the wedge in here and it's all stained and everything. Now the neck got a little messed up when I glued the fretboard on here, so I'm going to have to re-sand this and re-stain this. And I guess no time like the present. I might as well go ahead and re-sand it right now. And I'll just use a little bit of, I'm just going to use a little bit of 220, even though, well, no, I take it back. I'm going to use some 400. Here's a little bit of 400. I'll just lightly sand it with that. Mostly to get the leather off of it because the leather kind of stuck to it, and just to smooth out the marks, the scuff marks really from the clamps. There's a few little kind of like glue bumps from when I put the fingerboard on. So I'm going to try to just roughly sand that too, just to get rid of the little feel there. I don't think it's much. It's because I wiped it down. There's almost nothing there. I'll just get rid of that little feel, and then we'll put another coat of varnish on this thing, and it should be good to go. Hopefully then late this afternoon we can go ahead and set it up, because this varnish only takes about 10 minutes to dry, and I'll just give it a little extra time to cure a little bit. But it should go on easy, I would hope, and be fine. That way, yep, that feels good now. Don't feel anything. For the varnish, I'm just using the little rattle can Minwax, and that's all is required for something when you're just doing a small project like this. You could do a whole instrument with this, but it would be expensive probably. By the time you put enough coats on it, you'd have to use several cans probably. Well, now that this mandolin is essentially fixed, we're just going to set it up now, and so we need to start by putting the nut back on it. And I think the original nut will probably still work. I haven't actually tested it yet, but I'm just cutting through the little block that I put on here, or the little filler piece that I put in here for the truss rod. So we cut most of that out there, and probably have to take a file and stick it in there to make sure that it's cut out okay. I think there's a little bit of junk here on the front where the old glue was and stuff. I'm going to get rid of that. Try to give it the best shot for matching up that we can. Yeah, I think that's fine right there. See if it's sitting flat. I think it's fairly flat, but it seems like there's a little bit of something there. I'm going to see if I can get rid of it. I think that'll probably be okay. I'm a little bit leery that that nut will be tall enough. Oh, it'll probably be okay. So I'm going to go with that and kind of hope for the best. And we got stuff built up on the nut here too, so I'm going to clean that off. Glue and junk mostly. I don't think it was ever set on there perfect, so it'll be set on there a little better this time. With all this glue buildup, it couldn't have been sitting very flat. That looks much better. I don't see any air gap there now. I think we're sitting pretty good. So I'll put some of this glue on here. Let me double check the bottom here. I think the bottom's okay, but again, it might have a little bit of something. So I'll just kind of rubbing it over there just to make sure it's smooth. That feels good. Okay, so let's get our glue on here. There's a little bit of plastic trim that's kind of loose right here, and we can do that, fix that with this glue, same glue. And wipe it off, and then I think I'll just take a rubber band or something like that and go around it. Oops, the rubber band just broke. That didn't help. Well, it's never simple when I'm doing something. Okay, so hopefully that'll all set up here pretty quick and we can move on to the next thing. Well, it's time to get this mandolin strung up. It's time to put the hardware back on it, so we'll do that first. These look like the old Schaller tuning keys, except that I
have a feeling these are kind of a knockoff. You'd think they'd say Schaller on there somewhere if they were, but that's what they look like. They look like the old Schaller tuning keys. These seem to fit pretty well, at least, these eyelets, so that's good. One of them there is a little bit too loose. Yeah, those last two are a little bit loose, but the rest of them fit pretty nice and snug. Okay, so here's the washer that was on it. That washer's too big, in my opinion. Let's see if I've got a smaller washer that we can put on this thing. I may have to bore it out. I've got a real small washer here, but I have a feeling I'll have to make the hole bigger. So I'll go to the metal lathe and bore that out, and then I'll put it back on here and get this thing put together. I didn't show drilling this out, but I drilled it out on the metal lathe. You can spin the washer and hold the bit still, and it'll make the hole for you on a tiny washer like this, and that works pretty good. The only problem is on the back side where it pokes through, it leaves a big burr, so I'm taking the burr off right now. And you could say you could do that on the machine out there too, but it was kind of awkward, so I just decided to do it like this. So there's a million ways to do everything. I would have had to reverse everything to get the burr off of it, because the burr's on the inside that you can't see, and I had it in a collet chuck. It's one of them complicated explanations. Just take my word for it. This was easier, and I think it's good. I'm not 100% sure it'll fit yet, but I think it will. Yep, it does. It goes on there, and then we'll put his brass nut back on here. It's just my luck. It's sitting off to the one side a little bit. Doesn't seem like it wants to turn very well. As usual, if it can be a problem, it will be a problem. I'll just have to get in here and clean out this side a little bit more where we can get the wrench on it. That might be enough. I'm not really sure I have the right size wrench is my other problem. Nothing's ever simple. It's acting like it's not threading on right. It's really getting tight, and it's not, and it shouldn't be. I used the same stuff. I didn't change anything. I don't know if the threads got boogered up or something. That may be what it is, because it looks like it's slicing up this nut a little bit. If it can be a problem, it will be a problem. That's all I know for absolute certainty. Putting a drop of oil on it. Not that you typically use oil with brass threads, but you got to do what you got to do. Try it again. It might go on there this time better. Well, now it seems like it's going on fairly easy. I don't know. It's getting tight again. All right, I'm trying to get it good and snug up there. That feels pretty like it's tightening up there finally. That feels pretty snug. So I'm going to just stop right there, and then we'll move on from there. I didn't have any of that in frame, I'm sorry, but I did just tighten this down with this, and it did get snug, so I guess that's as good as it needs to be. And I did flatten out and straighten the fretboard itself and the neck, so hopefully the truss rod won't play much of a role anyway. Okay, let's move on. Quite honestly, the holes aren't lined up as perfect as they could be. I had to take the bushing out to get it back in there, and then I'm putting the bushing back in, and it's pinching. It really is. It's not working real well. Yeah, it's not that great. Anyway, it just kind of is what it is. I didn't create that problem either. Quite honestly, I forgot that I had not re-drilled these holes, so that screw went in actually pretty good for not having re-drilled the hole. I'm just going to punch the holes with this punch, because they'll line up and that'll be good enough. So that's what I did, and now I'll put the screw back in yet again. These do not line up as well as they could. I'm afraid that's going to make them a little hard to tune. I really always try to make sure that my tuning keys line up and go into the peg head without binding, because when they bind, they are always very hard to turn. Not much I can do about that without a big hassle, and I doubt he would want me to spend a lot of time and money on that. So I'm going to pass on that because I didn't create that problem. And you might be saying, well, you changed it with this, you know, with what I did. And I didn't change anything. The hole spacing's exactly the same as it was before. There's no difference in the hole spacing at all. I re-drilled them with the same size drill bit that the holes were drilled with, and you know, all I did was just open up these bottom 2 holes, and the rest of it was exactly in the same place. And I used the front side here holes as the lineup, so I didn't change anything, I promise you. I drilled it on a drill press, so I know I drilled them square and drilled them straight. I did what I could, it just ain't right. That's all I can tell you. And that's fairly common on homemade instruments, that these don't go in there real well and they bind, and that's what's happening here. They're just binding up. I mean, they go in, but they're not going in real easy. And then you have to force the bushings back in, because it pushes the bushing out, and it just isn't good. We'll just do the best we can with what we got to work with. My buddy Jeff Bradshaw would be on me about this because I've been tightening them up as I go. And the only reason I'm doing that is because these tuner, they can't move anyway. Everything's lined up exactly like it has to be lined up because they're pinched in there. So you can't move it one way or the other. So it matters not that I'm tightening them up all the way as I go in this particular case. That's about as good as it's going to get. And like I said, it pushes these bushings back out, so I'm going to force them back down in there as much as I can, but they're not going all the way like they should. Oh well, stuff happens. That's the way it's going to be. And now we'll put his truss rod cover back on this. Line up this one and re-poke the hole a little bit because this one got refilled in. Okay, well that takes care of that. Now I got to get a bridge and have to make a bridge fit this top because he didn't have a bridge for it, he said. So we'll get that going and we'll move on to the next. Okay, we're going to fit this bridge to the top here. I have it turned where the saddle is pointing forward. It fits pretty good already. Now, I go this direction on purpose. I don't like going this way, and you might say, well, it fits better that way. No, it actually fits better this way, and the advantage of going this way is that you can keep the angle perfect. Where if you're going this way like this, you'll be rocking it, and your angle you'll round off these edges. When I do this thing will fit like a glove, plus I can lean it slightly back, which keeps it from leaning forwards all the time, because that's where all your pressure is. So I'm putting the pressure on the back edge as I'm sanding this. And you notice I don't move it very far. So it fits the exact spot of the top, just like it should fit the exact spot of the top. It's already fitting pretty close. You can see I'm right over the old mark. Now let's just see how well it fits. It fits perfectly. It really does fit it nice. I'm looking to see if I can see any air under it. Well, truthfully, I can. There is some
it's still riding high in the middle. Yeah, it's not as close as I thought. It's still riding high in the middle. So I'm going to take it over to the orbital sander, knock some of this middle out of this thing because this is riding pretty high on this thing. I'm finding out that it's kind of hard to match this top because this cedar is soft that he's used here on this top, and you can feel the lumps in it, you know, it's kind of awkward to try to make this thing match up perfectly. It's pretty close, and it'll be fine, I think, but I'm just going to work on it a little bit more. I've taken it over to the sander a couple of times and tried to knock out the high spots. I think at some point you got to cut your losses, so I think that's where I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to put an antler saddle on this, so I'm going to clean up this saddle here and get it ready to work on there. Well, now for the big moment. We're going to start putting the strings on this baby after repairing that neck that was pretty much broken in half. And this ought to fix all of its woes, I would say, and probably won't have any further trouble. But you never know until you know. We will soon know. So I'm just going to lightly put this on here and get it approximately just snug. And then I'll cut that one off. Then I'll put on one of the E strings. The only reason I'm doing that is I'm going to probably do a little bit more sanding under pressure because the sanding under pressure seems to help quite a bit. That seems to be working. I can tell the strings are crazy high down here, at least especially on the treble side. And they look like they're going to be close on the back end, but it may be a little bit high even on the back end. Okay, put a little bit of tension on that, but not very much. And I think I'll just cut off a strip of this, slide that in here, bridge up on it. The little extra tension there that the strings provide helps a little bit more to get it just a little bit tighter to the top. Well, I'll be honest, it doesn't look as good as I'd like it to look, but it's not terrible. So I'm just going to go with that. I'll get her strung up and I'll show you what it's looking like, and we'll set the intonation and all that good stuff. Got the strings on it kind of loose, but I put a little felt on there to help muffle any sounds, and I'll slide that back up on there, and that we're in the ballpark. Now what I want to do is get the intonation set approximately right before we tune it up. I'll let you look at the tuner as I try to look at it upside down. It's a little harder for me to see it this way, but you know, as I sit here and think about this, it's not going to work this way anyway. These strings are crazy high on the E side, and they're actually pretty low on the G side. I'm not sure the G's going to play without buzzing. Probably, but just barely. So I've got some work to do on the setup. I'm going to work on this nut especially, and then we'll come back and do the intonation. Okay, I got the nut closer. I don't even know if I got it perfect yet, but it's closer. So it makes it at least feasible to start setting this thing up. I think I've got the strings a little low back here, so I'm going to raise these up a little bit before we get going, because no point in being crazy off before you try to set your intonation. You need it fairly close. Let's check the G first here.
pretty close. Just a fuzz flat, so go just a hair forward. And I'm having trouble with my arthritis today. It's really hard to do this strength-wise. Yeah, that arthritis, it can just take the strength out of your hands. That sure is rattling. Maybe it's because this other string's so loose. That's a D right now. It's fretting out, I guess. We just got it too low. It's still a little bit too low. Yeah, it's still holding the pick up here, so it's just too low. I have to loosen this up and raise it up a little bit. It's pretty snug there at about the 7th or so. That's probably closer. Pretty close. Not very far off. I think I'll just go ahead and tune it up, and I'll let you hear it as soon as I get it up to pitch. Well, there you have it, my friends. The new neck and all. And I should say newly repaired neck and all. I feel a little bit of a sharpness right there on the corner of that. I always knock that kind of stuff down whenever I'm working on an instrument. You know, I'm sure he's been played that way for a long time because this is the same nut that was in it. I always try to get rid of any sharpness or anything that gets in the way. So let's play a little bit and see what it sounds like. This nut is bothering me a lot. It stands up kind of sharp. I gotta do something about that. That might help a little bit. Still not the best. Let's see what it sounds like. My hands are so arthritic today, I really having trouble. I think we got some rattling going on. I didn't level the frets. I just put it back on there and tried to make it work the way it was working. Although I do think I've got it a little bit low on the bass side here. So I'm thinking of raising this just a little bit and seeing what it sounds like, see if it's still rattling. Have to retune it. Pretty good sound, really. It's got a decent sound. It's got a Eastern cedar top, red cedar, and it's not really quarter sawn. It's kind of angular sawn, almost quarter sawn. That's why you see those stripes are going through there at different angles. It's book matched, of course. I'm not knocking it at all. I think it's a pretty decent little mandolin. I'll probably do a little bit of a fret job on it before I tell the customer it's finished because I do hear some rattling going on there. And so if I level out the frets perfectly level, I think it'll be set up just about as good as it can be set up. I'm real happy with the work I did on it. I think that neck on there is a plus. I do not think it will ever break again. I think it's there to stay.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.